The prairie breathed like an old soul at dusk, wind curling the dust into ghostly shapes that slid between the half-forgotten buildings of the town. The sun sank low and bled a last strip of copper against the horizon, and in that fading light you could almost believe the land remembered every sorrow that had passed across it. Folks said time out here did not heal, it only taught you how to carry the weight of scars quieter. I once saw two souls meet beneath that sky, two people, so broken by the cruelty of others that they had nearly forgotten how to touch the living world. Their story was not the kind sung in saloons or carved into legend. It was quieter, more fragile, a flame cupped in a trembling hand. Yet it was the kind of story you never forget, for it whispered what love truly means. Eli Carter walked with a gait that seemed to carry both weariness and restraint, a man who had known violence and carried shame like a saddle no longer his own, but still strapped to his back. He worked ranches up and down the territories, never staying long enough for roots to grow. His hands bore the strength of a man who knew fences, horses, and the hard weight of tools. But his eyes carried something softer, something he hid under the brim of his hat. He was not searching for comfort the night he entered Holloway's saloon. He sought only a place to escape the hollow wind. Behind the counter stood Maeve Holloway, a widow burdened with debts not of her own making. Once she had kept a small home with curtains she had stitched herself, but after her husband's gambling stripped everything away, she was forced into the dim-lit saloon. Folks spoke of her in cruel whispers, eyes trailing her every move with a judgment that made her shoulders curve inward. Some called her tainted or cursed, as though widowhood were a contagion that had spoiled her worth. She served drinks with a fragile dignity, each step deliberate, each smile measured, so it would not be mistaken for invitation. That night Eli saw her pushed by a drunk rancher, his words slurred with disrespect. Maeve flinched as though the touch burned, and Eli, without raising a fist, placed himself between her and the man. He did not fight, did not shout. He simply stood, shoulders squared, and in his quiet presence the drunk faltered and retreated. Maeve's eyes met his for a brief second, filled with both gratitude and a pain too deep for words. Something unspoken passed between them in that moment, as if two wounded animals had recognized the same scar. Eli began to return, though not like other men who came seeking warmth in shadows. He did not touch her hand when she poured his drink, nor ask for anything she was unwilling to give. He sat in the corner, watching her endure the jeers and whispers with a quiet endurance that felt almost holy. Some nights, when her shift ended, he would walk a few steps behind her down the darkened street, saying nothing, simply a shadow that kept her safe. One evening he fixed the latch on the saloon's back door, leaving no note, only the mended wood. Another time, he placed a clean tin cup of water on the bar for her after the rowdy cowboys had left. These gestures spoke louder than any declaration, and Maeve, though cautious, began to soften. Their conversations were sparse. A remark about the weather, a brief acknowledgement of weariness. Yet in the pauses lingered something fragile and growing. They shared silence like others might share a prayer, and in those moments Maeve felt her heart beat a little less guarded. She began to notice the gentleness in Eli's rough hands when he lifted a chair, or the way he glanced away whenever their eyes lingered too long. Trust did not bloom quickly, but each night was another thread pulled tight in the fabric of something new. Still, Maeve carried a fear that ran bone deep. Every brush of skin, every accidental closeness reminded her of pain. Once, when Eli reached to hand her a lantern, she recoiled so suddenly she nearly dropped it. Shame reddened her face, but Eli only whispered, so soft she could barely hear, "I'll never be the one to harm you." His words lingered longer than any touch could. Yet the town was not kind. Rumors spread that she had trapped him with her widow's tricks, that he was a fool courting ruin. Eli overheard the gossip, but said nothing. He considered leaving, thinking his presence only worsened her standing. When he told her so, Maeve's voice cracked with a tremor she did not mean to reveal. "Please don't go." It was her first plea, her first step into vulnerability. Eli stayed. One storm-racked night, Maeve found him mending a broken fence outside the saloon. Rain poured in silver streams down his shoulders, his shirt clinging to him as thunder rolled over the plains. She called him inside, insisting he not drown himself in the night's fury. Candlelight flickered against the wooden walls, shadows dancing as water dripped from his hair. For a long moment they said nothing. She stood inches from him, her chest tight, and confessed in a trembling voice, "Go slow, it hurts." It was not just the hurt of flesh she spoke of, but the ache of trust, of memory, of wounds that had never been given time to heal. Eli's answer was steady, as if he had been carrying it all his life. "I'd die before I hurt you." The world outside vanished. Rain, thunder, gossip, judgment, none of it mattered. In that stillness, intimacy was not found in passion, but in gentleness. Eli brushed a damp strand of hair from her face, his touch lighter than wind. Maeve pressed her head against his chest, feeling his heart beat steady and unafraid. They did not rush. They did not need to. The moment itself was the vow, the quiet promise that neither would ever be alone again. But the town had not finished with them. Days later, drunk cowboys mocked Eli in the open street, calling him a fool, sneering that he wasted himself on a saloon widow. Maeve heard their laughter from the doorway, shame flooding her once more. But Eli did not raise fists or let violence spill. He stood tall, his voice calm but iron strong. "She's worth more than all of you put together." The words cut sharper than any blade. For the first time, Maeve saw a man stand not just beside her, but for her. And in that moment, she could no longer hide behind shame. She stepped out into the street, her shoulders square despite trembling inside, and placed her hand into Eli's. Together they walked, their silence defying every cruel word. It was a small act, but in a town ruled by judgment, it was an act of thunder. People stared, some scoffed, but Maeve no longer bent beneath them. She had found dignity not in being accepted, but in being chosen by one who understood her worth. The next morning, dawn broke clear over the prairie. Eli and Maeve rode out side by side, the horizon stretching wide before them. Her head lifted high for the first time in years, and though they spoke no words, the silence between them was filled with promise. Two broken lives, stitched together not by fire or thunder, but by patience, gentleness, and a vow made in whispers. And if you listen close to the wind that still runs through that town, you may hear the lesson carried with it. Some hurts linger like bullets buried beneath the skin, but when a soul meets another who moves slow, who treads soft as rain, healing becomes possible. Love is not the fire that consumes. It is the vow in the dark, steady as breath, certain as dawn. "I'll die before I hurt you."